Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome on this beautiful August Tuesday with school starting here before long and everybody wrapping up summer vacations. We thank you for finding time in your busy days and schedules to spend an hour with us here at Kansas Housing as we work together to unlock home across our state. My name is Ryan Vinson. I'm Executive Director at Kansas Housing Resources Corporation, sometimes called KHRC, sometimes called Kansas Housing. And it's so good to see so many of you on this virtual call. I was looking through the roster and there are people from all over the state, all over different industries, different stakeholders, all friends, all people that are interested, that live for their communities, that care about being good neighbors, that want to invest in their local housing stock. And we are thrilled to partner with you to do that. We've got a lot to cover today in this The Journey Home Estate Housing Update webinar. Again, it'll be about an hour, very relaxed format. We really take this time just to update you, our stakeholders, on a lot of good things, good investments, good happenings, homes unlocked across the state. Before I really dive into it, though, I do want to just make a couple of housekeeping announcements. This webinar platform offers a lot of different tools for you to be able to utilize during this webinar. You are muted and your video is off, but we do encourage you to make sure that you're dropping your questions in using the questions function on your toolbar. We have got a team of wonderful, dedicated KHRC staff that are eagerly waiting to field your question. We'll be trying throughout this presentation to reply to you all and to include you as the audience in those responses. But don't worry, we are going to have a Q&A at the end of this presentation that will allow you to have a little bit more interactive of a dialogue with some of our key presenters here today. Finally, one of the questions that always comes up and is always important is, will we be providing a copy of the slides and this recording after the presentation? And the answer to both is yes. Everybody that registered for this will be receiving a copy of the recording. We'll also be making those available on our YouTube channel, so be watching for that. I see Emily just posted in our chat function, so hopefully you'll see that we're able to get some information out in addition to what the presenters are providing during this presentation. Switching gears now away from housekeeping and really about what to expect for today's webinar. We've got a lot to cover, as I mentioned. We realize that a few of you may not be really familiar with KHRC, the work that we do, the lives that we touch. So we're going to take just a minute and give just that 30,000-foot overview, very quick. And then we're really going to spend our time on a couple of other areas that I think you're most interested in today. We're going to talk a little bit about our housing needs. Just a reminder of the state housing study that we went through, the historic 2022 legislative session, and the new funding, resources, and tools that came from that session. We're going to talk, most importantly, about where we're at getting those resources out and about in your communities, whether it's Western Kansas, Southeast Kansas, rural, urban, you name it. We've got investments flying out left and right. We're building homes, and we're so excited to be sharing some of those success stories with you. You're going to hear from Deanne Engstrom, our Housing Development Director, who will be updating you on some of those different metrics, some of those different resources, where we're at getting those remaining dollars in your communities as far as progress to date. You're going to be hearing from Emily Sharp, who will be sharing some of our different successes, some of the different success stories. We know ultimately that it's not just about those four walls and that roof. We know that it's about the lives that we're touching, the memories that we're creating, and we take that charge very seriously in our work at Kansas Housing. So we're going to share a couple of those stories so that you're ready to retell those stories to the policymakers and to the other community partners that we need to be engaging with in order to continue our important work. We're going to then segue into the current legislative session. You're going to be hearing from Aaron Beckerman, KHRC's General Counsel. Aaron's going to give a quick overview without getting too much into the weeds about what happened this legislative session. Some of our resources have been under threat, and we're going to have just a little bit of a summary of where those resources are at, what impact those legislative changes will have on our programs and our resources. And then we'll shift gears a little bit, and we're going to look beyond 2025. We're going to all get out our crystal balls and we're going to talk about how to move forward as partners, as stakeholders, remembering our respective roles, but working together to continue to unlock more homes across this great state that we all live in. So that's what to expect. We anticipate it being about an hour, but again, there will be a portion at the very end for questions and answers. So make sure that those questions are coming. We look forward to them. So let's go ahead and just give a quick reminder of our role here at Kansas Housing. KHRC is a nonprofit public corporation. We are celebrating, I believe it's now 21 years of serving as the state's housing finance agency. We administer a variety of housing and community programs on your behalf. Our mission itself is simple. We help Kansans access the safe, affordable housing they need with the dignity they deserve, you deserve. I was just in Colby yesterday, coming back from a groundbreaking at a multifamily property that I believe Emily's going to be talking about soon, and to just hear a tenant talk about her new home and what it means to her in her job, in her family life, it just meant so much to me. And we remember that in our mission. We always serve our clients with dignity. As far as who we work with you, whether you are a lender, a realtor, a government official, a property manager, a nonprofit. We need each of you to be part of the solution to our state's housing problems. Let's talk a little bit about our programs. Just a reminder, oh, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself. First, we're gonna just talk quickly about something that comes up about every legislative session, and I think it's important for people to remember. While KHRC is not a traditional state agency, we are very much accountable and subject to our policymakers. We take transparency and collaboration very seriously. They're part of our core mission and values. We are governed by a board of directors that is appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate. We serve statewide. We administer our federal and state resources equitably. We work together with you at whatever role you have to make sure that we're serving each area of the state and getting those resources out the door, because every community in our state has a housing problem. Just a reminder that our annual reports, our financial statements, our NOFAs, our award announcements are all publicly available. We make sure that we're communicating to our policymakers, to news media, to other state agencies and federal partners. Because again, accountability is key. We want to make sure that we're serving you, and we do that best by being transparent and accountable. Now we'll talk about our programs that we offer at KHRC. I'd love you to take just a minute at some point during this next week and just hop on our website at kshousingcorp.org. Check out the range of programs from funding emergency shelters and domestic violence centers to our key community action agency partners around the state that do wonderful anti-poverty work. We provide tenant-based rental assistance and actual housing development, which we're going to spend some time talking about today. Those are tax credits and funds from HUD and other partners that we're able to roll out to finance affordable housing for low and moderate income households in rural and urban areas alike. We've got a down payment assistance program. We offer weatherization assistance for qualifying households. We also have a healthy compliance department because we want to make sure that our housing is built well, that it serves people that it's intended to serve, and that we're long-term good neighbors. We want to make sure that we're investing long-term in your communities. Again, check out our website at kshousingcorp.org. Learn more about KHRC's programs. I know many of you have been with us in the past, but just to recap, we rolled out a massive state housing needs assessment in 2021 during the peak of the pandemic. The same time, we were administering nearly $350 million in emergency rent and foreclosure prevention assistance. But we knew that it was important that we had actual data, quantitative, qualitative data that we were able to take to you all, our stakeholder partners. We can't fix a housing problem without understanding what the need is, and the need is vast. And while that study is a couple years old now, it's still available on our website. It's got great regional and holistic data that would be helpful to your community as you're thinking about how to move forward addressing your housing problems. The study revealed that every year, just our rural communities are needing between 4,000 and 5,000 homes per year just to keep up with the needs of the employers, the needs of the schools, the needs of the hospitals, the needs of the community members. That's just our rural areas. Our urban areas need thousands more homes per year. But we captured that data. It's in our state housing study. And with you all, we went to the State House and we had meetings and educated our policymakers. And they passed historic resources in 2022, $62 million for moderate income housing, 2 new tax bills, a Kansas Affordable Housing Tax Credit and a Kansas Housing Investor Tax Credit that have been rolled out. We have a new Rural Home Loan Guarantee Program. And the last 2 legislative sessions, in addition to rolling out the resources that we were charged with in 2022, we also received additional funds for a revolving loan fund and additional moderate income housing program funds. All good news and a lot of work for us, for you, but it's an exciting time as we're finally addressing the underlying housing problem in our state. You're going to be hearing from Deanne here shortly, who will be able to share the successes we've had rolling out those resources. So let's go to the next slide here, and it looks like Deanne's already on. Deanne, do you want to take it from here on sharing the good news where we're at?
Yeah, thank you so much, Brian, for the introduction and the opportunity to speak with you all today about the exciting momentum we're seeing in housing development across Kansas. So I am Deanne Engstrom. I'm the Director of Housing Development at KHRC. I'm excited to walk you through the progress we've made while highlighting the impact of all of our housing development initiatives since 2022 and the direct results across the state. So since 2022, the total development budget across all of our housing development resources has reached $1.8 billion. This figure reflects investment and collaboration between many partners, many of you that are on the call today, that drive housing development in Kansas. Our state investment alone has totaled $722 million, allocated since 2022 and for the next 10 years. This long-term commitment emphasizes a critical role that the state funding plays in strengthening affordable housing market and supporting the long-term viability across Kansas. These state programs include the Moderate Income Housing, Kansas Housing Investor Tax Credits, the Revolving Loan Fund, and the Kansas Affordable Housing Tax Credits, all of which we'll describe more in the next slides. We've also successfully leveraged key federal resources. This includes our low-income housing tax credits, often referred to as LIHTCs, our private activity bonds, and various HUD programs such as Home and National Housing Trust Fund. All of these combined state and federal efforts, we've been able to fund developments of 7,206 homes across Kansas. These homes represent a mix of new construction, rehabilitation, preservation projects that all contribute to housing stability and economic growth in our communities. Now let's take a closer look at the state-funded investments that contribute to the $722 million committed since 2022. The Kansas Housing Investor Tax Credit program accounts for approximately $43.4 million of the total allocation since its launch. This program facilitates investment in housing and supports growth of communities facing housing shortages by helping attract new employees, residents, and families. The Moderate Income Housing Program, combined with MIH ARPA, which is the American Rescue Plan Act, has invested nearly $50 million to support development in rural communities. This targets to cities and counties with a population under 60,000, and the program focuses on housing that serves households with incomes between 60% and 150% area median income, also referred to as AMI. This plays a crucial role of addressing housing shortages in key areas by helping with grants that fill financing gaps where other resources might not be available. The Kansas Affordable Housing Tax Credit represents the largest investment at $630 million since 2022. Paired with the low-income housing tax credit, again, LIHTC, this tax credit investment has been a significant tool in creating competitive applications that expand the need for affordable housing statewide. All of these programs combined reflect a collaborative strategy that address a range of housing needs from moderate down to our most vulnerable populations across Kansas. Expanding further on the Kansas Affordable Housing Tax Credit, developers are leveraging the combination of these state credits with the federal tax credits, private activity bonds, and the HUD resources as Home and National Housing Trust Fund. This enhances project feasibility, and it ultimately delivers more affordable units where they're needed the most. In 2023, the program funded the development of approximately 2,200 homes through the state credit, low-income housing tax credits, and other federal resources. This significantly increased in 2024, leading to 2,600 homes, demonstrating the growing capacity to invest in affordable housing. And so far, in 2025, the state credits have already supported 585 homes in the most recent awards. These units were made possible through the first application of 4% LIHTC and KHTCs, which resulted in 4 projects. This number is expected to triple as additional funding rounds open and are awarded through the year, just demonstrating our continued momentum. Turning to private activity bonds, in 2022, the program began modestly just with one development totaling $5 million. By 2023, it grew substantially with the addition of the state credit to 12 developments at $250 million in total project cost. In 2024, the momentum continued with 14 developments at $300 million. And so far in 2025, through the first round, that's 4 developments totaling $137 million. These projects span both urban and rural communities, often paired with the private activity bonds with 4% low-income housing tax credits that deepen affordability. Let's take a closer look at 2 of our key state housing tools, which are the Moderate Income Housing Program and the Kansas Housing Investor Tax Credit. Both have seen significant activity and impact since 2022. Since 2022, the moderate income housing has received a combined $56 million in funding. To date, of that, 83.1% of that funding has already been awarded, with 81% of those projects currently under construction. This shows a strong pipeline of active development and demonstrates that awarded funds can translate to quick on-the-ground construction. For the Kansas Housing Investor Tax Credit Program, Kansas has awarded 43.4 million credits to investors since its launch in 2022. This resource continues to be highly competitive for investment in housing and has helped create large economic impacts in our communities across the state. We've officially opened a new 2025 round of both the Moderate Income Housing Grant and the Kansas Housing Investor Tax Credit Program. The round opened on August 1st and it will close on October 3rd. This round includes approximately the remaining $6 million in MIH funds and approximately $7 million in the Kansas Housing Investor Tax Credit allocation. Focusing on these moderate income resources, along with the Kansas Housing Investor Tax Credits and a new revolving loan fund, we've put together a case study to help look at a moderate income housing development in rural Kansas. This development consists of 7 separate buildings, collectively offering 24 units. This demonstrates how to address affordable housing needs in rural areas with creative capital stacks that bring together multiple funding sources. So on the left, you'll see an example of a conventional market rate project. With the total project cost of $4.8 million, the developers typically require to contribute 20% equity and secure financing with a 20-year loan. This financial structure often results in higher market rents, which turn into higher wages from tenants. These factors can create challenges in filling units and ultimately are not meeting the housing needs of the community. On the right, we see a creative capital stack combining several resources that include the Moderate Income Housing Grant, the Kansas Housing Investor Tax Credits, and a revolving loan fund. This approach reduces annual debt service requirements. This allows the developer to operate the property with lower rents, but still accommodate tenants with lower hourly wages. As a result, the project better aligns with the local workforce needs and meets the housing affordability and the needs in their community. This financing approach helps housing units align with all income levels of workers employed at the local hospital, school district, city government, and large dairy farm, which are all key employers in this community. The revolving loan fund was established in 2022, as Ryan mentioned, to provide builders, developers, cities, counties, housing organizations, and other nonprofits with a financing tool. These loans, these RLF loans, complement other resources by increasing borrowing capacity. They close funding gaps, and they support projects in both rural and urban markets. Applications are open, they're accepted on a rolling basis, and they may be submitted independently now, or they can be paired with other KHRC resources, such as our Moderate Income Housing Grant and our Kansas Housing Investor Tax Credit. Here's where we're at today. Of the total 30 million available, 6.2 million has been approved and committed. We're in the process of reviewing over 7.1 applications and leaves approximately 17.3 million remaining in funds available for future projects. This map illustrates all of our housing development awards across Kansas since 2022. As you can see, the reach is broad and it's statewide. It reflects an ongoing mission and our commitment to funding affordable housing in communities across Kansas. Now I'll turn it over to Erin, who will provide an update on the latest state and federal legislative developments impacting housing.
Thank you, Dan. As Ryan and Dan mentioned, my name is Erin Beckerman. I'm General Counsel here at Kansas Housing, and I'm just going to do a really brief overview of what we've seen on the legislative front. I'll focus primarily on what we're seeing at the state level, but we'll also touch on some of the developments at the federal level as well that are impacting KHRC. So first, we'll look at this past legislative session here in Kansas. Even before the session began in January, housing was a big topic over at the State House, as it has been for the last few years. An interim committee on housing met for 2 days in November before the session started to just look at housing and housing issues here in Kansas. KHRC presented along with a lot of other stakeholders, maybe some of you on this call, and those sessions are available on the legislators' YouTube website. So encourage you to look at that. It was a great discussion, a great session. As the session started this year, the focus on housing continued with a particular focus on the Affordable Housing Tax Credit Act. As we've talked about, that Affordable Housing Tax Credit created a state credit to pair with the federal low-income housing tax credit and to generate housing development here in Kansas. So again, kind of working with an existing federal program that KHRC already administered. The focus this year started on the House side with a bill proposing to eliminate the state credit entirely. There was a lot of discussion about that proposed bill, including a hearing where I believe there are around 40 neutral or opposition conferees. Some of you on this call may have provided testimony and talked with legislators about the state credit and the program in response to that bill. The House did end up passing that bill that would eliminate the program after 2025. On the Senate side, the Senate amended the bill in the Senate Commerce Committee to allow the state credit to continue for 9% low-income housing tax credit projects. So for those that maybe don't do low-income housing tax credit program, there are 9% and 4% credits that can be utilized. So the bill that was ultimately passed in the Senate Commerce Committee did allow the credit to continue for those 9% projects. Ultimately, during the conference committee, a compromise was reached between these two versions of the bill, and what passed is what's referenced here on the slide, House Bill 2289. That was signed by the governor on April 24th. And from KHRC's perspective, it's the most significant legislation that came out of this past session. It amended the Affordable Housing Tax Credit Act as well as the Kansas Housing Investor Credit Act. So, and both of those programs are administered by KHRC, as we've talked about. So first, looking at the changes to the Affordable Housing Tax Credit Act. The legislation that was passed placed a $25 million cap on all state credits that could be awarded under the 2025 QAP. And that QAPs are Qualified Allocation Plan, which governs how KHRC awards the low-income housing tax credits. So again, with this cap in place, under that 2025 Qualified Allocation Plan, KHRC could only award $25 million in total state credits for both 4% and 9% projects. Under the legislation after the 2025 QAP, the state credit for 4% low-income housing tax credits were eliminated, and then a cap was placed on the state credits that could be awarded to 9% low-income housing tax credits at $8.8 million each year. Under this legislation, these limitations will remain in place from 2026 through 2028, when the state credit will then be discontinued entirely. So again, just to kind of recap where we stand after the passage of House Bill 2289, moving forward in 2026, there will be no state credit available for 4% low-income housing tax credit projects. And for those 9% low-income housing tax credit projects, KHRC will have $8.8 million available each year in state credits to award. And then that state credit will sunset in 2028. I should mention, we did have to make some changes to our 2025 QAP to make sure we were following this new law, and Deanne will kind of touch upon that and those changes that we made here in a little bit. Now, the other piece that was changed under House Bill 2289 was a change to the Kansas Housing Investor Tax Credit. This was a fairly technical change, but it's a change I know is really important to those that are investing in that program and participating in that program. So I want to make sure to highlight it for, highlight the change that was made. So under this legislation, the KHITC Act was amended to allow a transferee that acquires a Kansas Housing Investor Tax Credit to claim that credit in the same manner as the original qualified investor who received the credit. So again, kind of a technical change, but does make a really big impact on those that are participating in the program or possibly transferring or selling those credits. And then the last update from the 2025 legislative session over at the State House that I want to mention is regarding funding for the Moderate Income Housing Program. Now, that program was originally established in 2012, and since then, traditionally, the MIH program has received an allocation of at least $2 million each fiscal year, with some years, as we talked about today, being significantly more than $2 million. But like I said, typically what we've seen is $2 million each fiscal year. That did change this year. For this fiscal year, there were no funds allocated to the Moderate Income Housing Program, and given that change, given how popular the MIH program is, we wanted to make sure to highlight that for everyone here tuning in. Okay, now turning to the federal side, there is legislation that was just recently passed, went into law on July 4th, that I wanted to make sure to highlight because it will have a big impact on the housing development work that we do here at KHRC. So the One Big Beautiful Bill Act included a really historic housing credit expansion that impacts that low income housing tax credit program that we've talked about. So there were two changes made to that program. First, the act included a permanent 12% increase in the 9% low income housing tax credit allocations. So KHRC, on behalf of the state of Kansas and every other state across the country, will be receiving a larger 9% allocation than we have in years past. The other change under this act impacts the 4% low income housing tax credit projects. Under the IRS code, it's called a finance by test. And so for these 4% low income housing tax credit projects, they have to show that they are utilizing private activity bonds and that their housing project is being financed by at least 50% private activity bonds. But under this act that just recently passed, that test has been reduced to 25%. So that should make those projects pencil out a little bit better, a little easier. Okay, and then moving on, I just want to give a quick update on what we expect to see looking forward. So first we'll start here in Kansas. So what we expect to see here in Kansas, even before the session starts, we again expect to see some discussions about housing. There are a few different interim committees that may be discussing housing or housing related topics like tax credits, like economic incentive programs. So that's definitely something to look out for if you are wanting to follow along with what's happening over at the State House. Those calendars are available on the legislature's website. The Legislative Post Audit Committee here in May did select the Kansas Affordable Housing Tax Credit Program for a limited scope audit. The objective of that audit is to look at the amount of affordable housing tax credits that have been awarded and used since the program began in 2022. That audit is being done by the Legislative Post Audit and is ongoing now, and it's expected that the Legislative Post Audit will finalize the report and present to the Legislative Post Audit Committee sometime this fall. So another thing to look out for in the coming weeks, if you want to listen into that committee meeting. Along those lines, as the session begins next year, we expect there to be a continued focus on the Kansas Affordable Housing Tax Credit Act. We are still seeing questions about that program, like the ones raised by the Legislative Post Audit Committee, just about how the program works and what value it brings to the state in comparison to the fiscal impact of providing those tax credits. So given that, we expect there to be more discussions about whether to continue the credit for the next few years. Additionally, we expect that there may be some discussion about possible technical changes or clarification to the legislation that passed this prior session. So all of that to say that I think that as we look on the horizon for the 2026 legislative session, we do expect the affordable housing tax credit to again be a topic of conversation. With another topic that we expect to see, oh, sorry, I'm not done yet. We got more legislative stuff. We do expect to see a conversation regarding MIH funding again. As I mentioned, there were no funds allocated to the MIH program this year. That is unusual based on the prior years. So we expect there to be another question of whether to continue the traditional $2 million allocation or to do more or less this coming year. On the federal side, want to just touch on this really briefly. We are continuing to monitor the appropriations discussion and the fiscal year 2026 budget negotiation process. At this point, it's really, really hard to speculate about where that funding may end up. The Trump administration put forth a budget request that proposed several cuts and changes that could impact KHRC's programs. As an example, with regard to HUD, the administration's budget request proposed to consolidate various housing programs into a single block grant and to decrease HUD's budget overall by around 51%, which would include eliminating the home grant program, which is a grant program that KHRC utilizes for housing development, and our first-time homebuyer program. That said, though, again, it's still very early in that process. That's just the administration's budget request. And the process is still very much ongoing with the House and Senate appropriation committees weighing in and working on these budgets as well. Just as an example, just to show you kind of some of the differences that we're seeing on the federal side, the Senate Appropriations Committee passed out the HUD budget, and their proposal is about $5.5 billion higher than the House's. They maintain level funding for the home program. They also have proposed increased funding for homelessness assistance grants like the emergency solution grants that KHRC administers. The Senate Appropriations Committee also maintained level funding for community services block grants. This is another program KHRC administers. So it's all still very up in the air. There's a lot of differences between what the administration, the Senate, and the House have proposed. So it's hard to say where the funding may end up. But we are certainly continuing to monitor that process and the impact it could have on KHRC's programs like Home, CSBG, and ESG. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Deanne to talk about the 2025 Qualified Allocation Plan.
Thanks, Erin. So as Erin mentioned, House Bill 2289 introduced important changes to the Kansas Affordable Housing Tax Credits. So these updates ultimately resulted in changes to the existing 2025 Qualified Allocation Plan, often referred to as the QAP. The team at KHRC strategically collaborated and developed an approach that maximized the $25 million KHRC cap for 2025. The amended QAP provided disclosure and transparency regarding the amount available credits in each round. We believe this approach was the most equitable and allows the most competitive applicants to participate. KHRC held a public hearing on May 23rd, and the amended qualified allocation plan was signed by the governor on May 28th. In addition to the $25 million cap, House Bill 2289 also eliminates the Kansas Affordable Housing Tax Credits, the KAHTCs, on 4% applications next year. With that, stakeholders can review this change going forward inside the 2026 draft qualified allocation plan, which was posted to our website on August 1st. We look forward to hearing all of your comments on the 2026 QAP. The public hearing is scheduled for August 27th at 10:30 a.m., and the comment period will close on September 5th. Now I'll turn it over to Emily, who will share exciting updates about developments and activity and events happening across the state.
Thank you so much, Deanne. My name is Emily Sharp, and I serve as Communications Director here at KHRC. Thank you to all of my colleagues for sharing the great information today, and thanks again to each of you for joining us and hanging with us this long. We really appreciate your attention and time today. As you can tell, and if you've been following housing news in Kansas over the last few years, you know that it's been a really exciting, really busy time for us with a lot of successes to celebrate. As Deanne shared, we have funded over 7,000, I think around 7,200 homes, she said, in the past few years. And behind every single one of those homes, there is a story of a family, a Kansan, a household who was impacted by having access to a quality, affordable home, all thanks to the resources provided through these programs that we administer, and the partnerships with all of you that make that happen. So I wanted to take just a brief minute to highlight some of the many successes that we've seen across the state in the past couple of years. First, going to Cottonwood Falls. This building that you see here was a vacant school building. And thanks to our MIH program, that very popular program that was established in 2012, got a big funding boost in 2022, and then in a couple years after that, but then didn't see any funding at all this past year. But thanks to our MIH program, we were able to help finance 10 moderate income homes that will serve moderate income Kansans in Cottonwood Falls. This program is designed to serve Kansans who earn too much to qualify for federally subsidized housing, but can still struggle to afford market rate housing, because we all know what housing prices are like these days. It's very expensive. In fact, the two folks that you see cutting the ribbon there in that photo, this couple, they are each Kansas Highway Patrol officers and are some of the first tenants of this this development, and are so pleased to be able to have access to this beautiful new home in Cottonwood Falls. We learned in the state housing needs assessment that we did in 2021 that there is a need for all types of housing to support Kansans at all phases of life and their housing journey across the state. So with a development like this, where we will see tenants paying anywhere between $600 and $800 a month in rent, that's a really affordable price point that is going to allow a young family to save for a down payment for a home in the future, for example. That could allow a senior to downsize, or a young professional who's just getting started in their career. And we're really excited about that. Continuing on to our next success story, we are going to be moving back to, I think back one more, Kim. We're going to be moving out to Dodge City to take a look at a big development underway out there. This Dodge City, of course, is seeing tremendous growth, great economic development, expansion of employers in the area, which is really exciting. But it also means that there is a huge need for housing to support all of those workers and all of those industries and the development and growth that's happening there. So we are so pleased to be part of this large development that ultimately will bring 227 homes to the community. 92 of those homes are complete so far. And what's really cool about this development is, again, it provides different types of housing to support Dodge Cityans at different phases in their lives and their housing journeys. So 197 of those homes will be single family houses. We'll see 25 townhomes, 8 barn dominiums, really innovative approach for this development, and also 10 tiny homes. And of those homes, 40 of them have been supported in part through the Moderate Income Housing Program and are dedicated to home ownership. So this will help Kansans achieve the dream of purchasing their first home ever at a price point anywhere from $197,000 to $232,000, which is pretty amazing in this market that we're seeing right now. As Deanne emphasized in her slide, making the deals work requires a variety of different funding sources. So we're so pleased that this particular development used that MIH funding, but it also used the Kansas Housing Investor Tax Credit funding, as well as rural housing incentive districts, which are administered by our partners and friends over at Commerce. So it's really all of these different resources coming together that is able to make these deals pencil out and get all of our partners on board so we can get this housing built. I'll also just note that the Hilmer Cheese Processing Facility recently brought a tremendous number of jobs to Dodge City. This development is specifically going to be housing those workers and those community members who will be supporting that growth and development. And we're so pleased to be a part of it. Continuing on, I think we're going to go up to the northwest corner of the state to Colby. And this, as Ryan mentioned, he was just out helping to cut the ribbon at this development just yesterday. So we don't even have the most recent photos yet, but definitely stay tuned for those. This is a really exciting development that would not have been possible were it not for that state tax credit, that Kansas Affordable Housing Tax Credit that was established in 2022, and again is going to be eliminated in 2028. It's being phased out in the meantime. This is that state tax credit that pairs with our federal low income housing tax credit, and it's going to provide 18 2- and 3-bedroom townhomes in the community. I should note that when we were doing our housing needs assessment, we were finding that some of these communities, these rural communities or underserved areas in particular, hadn't seen new significant multifamily development in decades. Some of these communities, the average age of their homes, their housing stock was built in the 1940s, if not earlier. So these are areas that were really in need of some investment. And specifically, the Willow Estates development will serve Colby families earning up to 60% of area median income, or AMI. And the rents are running $590 to $715 a month. And again, that's a price point that will actually leave something left over at the end of the month for those families that are saving, that are trying to get a handle on their rising expenses. And so we're so pleased about that. We have one final success story that I'd like to share with you, and it's just right down the road here in Topeka. The Union at Tower District just broke ground on this development at the beginning of the summer. It was a very rainy day, but we still had a big crowd out there very excited about celebrating this new development. This development is going to provide 250 1-, 2-, or 3-bedroom homes. You can see the renderings of what it's going to look like there, just in the shadow of the Capitol building. And this is an area that has been really underserved. There hasn't been a lot of new housing opportunities available right here in Central Topeka for some time. And this one will specifically serve households earning between 30 and 60% of AMI. Again, it was made possible through our federal low-income housing tax credits paired with that state housing tax credit, which has been a real game changer for development in Kansas in the last couple of years, but will be eliminated in 2028 and be reduced significantly each year up until then. But thanks to the affordability requirements of that program, the estimated average rent for these units is going to be around $903 a month, which again is pretty incredible for these quality units. So, as I mentioned, we have had a lot of success in the last couple of years rolling out these resources, but we've also seen a lot of challenges, and those are still continuing. Deanne mentioned that in the last few years, we've helped fund around 7,200 homes across the state. This is very exciting, but keep in mind that our housing needs assessment revealed a need for 3,800 to 4,800 homes in rural areas alone each year, every year for the next 5 years that the study was conducted. That isn't even touching the needs in those metro areas. So we have a vast need, a big housing shortage on our hands, and we've started to chip away at it, but we will see some of those resources be eliminated in the coming years based on the decisions taken by our legislature this past year, and we need to be prepared for that. Beyond that, just a quick glance at the headlines tells us that housing is continuing to be at the forefront, and it's a major challenge, not here just in Kansas, but across the country. We see that wages are not keeping up with the cost of housing. We see some projects that are being stalled because of uncertainty in federal funding. Right here in Topeka, housing prices doubling over the past 10 years, and a real slump in the supply available in Wichita. So it's daunting to think about exactly how we're going to work together to approach those challenges. And when we think about what's next and where we take things from here, I do have one suggestion for you. You can join us at the end of October in Overland Park for our annual Kansas Housing Conference. I know many of you have been a part of this event in the past, and we'd love to see you again this year. This year will be our 20th annual state housing conference, and this is an opportunity for us all to get together to learn about different regulations and programs and resources that are available, to have those important conversations, to connect with each other and form the partnerships and have the conversations necessary to really address these challenges. We will again be returning to the Overland Park Convention Center this year. With apologies to our friends out in Western Kansas, it's pretty much the only venue large enough to house us at this point, which is a good problem to have. But there will be a wide audience of folks working in the housing space there to tackle all of these challenges together. I'll pop some information in the chat about that, but we'd love for you to be a part of it, and we'd love to see you there. And then finally, we would love for you to keep in touch with us. Our door is always open. We're always available to answer questions, to meet with you, to provide information whenever possible. Our general email address is info@kshousingcorp.org. If you message that address, our staff will get your inquiry to the proper team member who can respond to you. Of course, I've put a lot of links into our chat about the different resources that we have available and the updates that we provide and how you can follow along with that. We would love for you to join our mailing list. This is where we publicize all of our funding announcements, our upcoming events, different things that we have going on that we want you to know about. And we also have an active presence on several different social networks. So we would welcome you to join and connect with us there to keep up on housing news across the state. So that wraps up our formal presentation for today, but I have been so pleased to see a very active question box. We have a lot of attendees who have been following along very closely and asking some thoughtful questions. I'm going to invite our panelists to come back on camera and join me, and we will be highlighting a few of your questions. We have about 10 minutes left. So if you have a question that did not get answered already, if you want to pop that in the question box, we will go ahead and share that information. I am getting one question already, and that is, when will registration for the Kansas Housing Conference open, which is a very good question. We are expecting to open registration by the end of the month. Our full agenda will also be available at that time. We do have sponsor and exhibitor registration open right now, and there are a few more booth spots left if you'd like to join us for that. We also have an exciting program that we are offering for the second time this year, second year in a row. We have a Friend of Affordable Housing Scholarship Program, which provides support for attendees who would get a lot out of this event, but who might not have the financial, the institutional support or resources to attend otherwise. So if you or a colleague or a friend you know is interested in attending, we would encourage you to apply, and I will drop chats I will drop links to all of that in the chat box. Okay, so we've seen a couple questions about what interim committees we might see taking up housing. Ryan or Aaron, would you care to speculate and share what information we have so far about the legislative committees we could see that might be following this issue in the new session?
Aaron, do you want to lead with that? I know that I did post a response in the chat forum, or the questions, just the specific committees, but you may have a little bit more insight to offer the audience.
Yeah, no, I think you touched upon it well. I think we're looking at there's a special committee on commerce, on taxation, and on government oversight that could look at tax credits, economic incentive programs, and housing just more generally. I believe Representative Curtis also shared the link where you can see those committees. And then if you go to the legislator's main page, down on the right-hand corner, there's the interim committee schedule that's posted every couple weeks. They update that. So that's a good place to look to see if anything's been scheduled on any of those committees.
And Aaron, I may just chime in too, in addition to the specific committees. I think it's important for our participants to understand that, you know, we think of the legislature as just running during January to April, but, you know, the work continues year round, and the conversations need to be continuing year round. Housing is so important, and it's a bipartisan issue, and KHRC is very careful to be apolitical. We're very careful recognizing our role as a public entity to not take sides, but our role is to educate you all as stakeholder partners about what the needs are, about what the successes that we've had with the limited investments we've been able to make, but also how much there is yet to do. And it takes continued conversations with policymakers, whether it's at the State House or whether it's in Congress, to understand those needs and how those resources can be key to being able to really address the underlying housing problem and not just respond to the housing crisis time after time. So we very much encourage you to be learning about the issues, and that's part of the reason that we have these webinars. Is part of the reasons that we have more in-depth conversations at the State Housing Conference over several days, so that you have the knowledge and the tools that you need to go talk to your local legislators about the impact of that new moderate income development in Cottonwood Falls, or that new tax credit development that's going to allow somebody that works at the local community college to be able to live in their community that they love.
Yeah, and I think Representative Curtis added that, yeah, talking to legislators outside of the session is helpful for them too, because once January hits, they're very, very busy. And as you know, Ryan, I think you and I both were over at the State House in September of last year to present. So yeah, these conversations are ongoing, and they don't just start in January. So it's good to stay informed and stay active.
One question that we have heard recently that I might put out to the group is we've seen that the Kansas Affordable Housing Tax Credit has been rolled back and will be eliminated beginning in 2028. We also saw that moderate income housing program, another state funded measure, has been funded every year until this year. So are we thinking that it's possible that the MIH program may go away or may not be funded again this year?
That's a thoughtful question, Emily, and I definitely want Deanne and Aaron to jump in if they have some thoughts, but I can kind of kick it off. You know, we're concerned. Historically, we've received some funding for moderate income housing for a decade plus. We've seen a real uptick in the amount of investment these last couple of years. And I think a little bit of the challenge is that there's this perception that from the State House, from lawmakers, policymakers, that, well, we've given you money, we've given you enough to fix the problem. And as you alluded to, Emily, that we've just touched the tip of the iceberg with this, that we're making a real dent in the underlying housing problem, but the needs are so vast, as the participants in this webinar understand. So that's why it's important that we educate and that we talk about the impact that we've made, but also how much work there is to do. But I'd very much encourage folks to remember that this is about economic development, that it's more than just housing. It's more than just neighborhoods and communities and schools and hospitals. If we want our employers to be able to expand, if we want our downtowns to be revitalized, if we want our communities to ultimately be successful, we need the economic impact of housing. And I hear it every time I'm traveling across the state, celebrating the new investments that we're making. Deanne, Aaron, do you have anything to add on that?
I'll just add with the, increasing project costs that we continue to face from all the developers with inflation, tariffs, the importance of all of our resources, in particular with the Moderate Income Housing Grant, is just a vital resource to continue to be the gap. A lot of times the projects won't pencil, they don't create affordability. With the Moderate Income Housing Grant, it does create, like my case study, lower rents, more wages that attract employers to these communities. So it's a vital resource in a complex capital stacking.
Kind of on that note, a thoughtful question from the audience that came up. So we're hearing about the importance of advocating for these resources, but as stakeholders, how do our partners have these conversations to support continued funding, or even expanding in some cases funding for these different resources? Where to begin with that?
Another excellent question. It just shows how thoughtful and engaged the participants are in this summer webinar that we're already having these conversations. I will say that stories make a big difference, and that you can give a lot of metrics and you can give a lot of dollar signs that are all important, but people connect with stories. So if you're able to get a state legislative member to your local habitat build event, if you're able to get them to your property dedication, if you're a community leader and you're just able to invite them to talk about how, you're hearing about employers wanting to expand, you're hearing about people wanting to relocate into their community, but there's no homes, and that you can throw all the economic incentives to the employer, but if there's no place for those jobs to go at night, you're ultimately not going to be successful as an employer or as a community. Then that's a real challenge. So I think making those personal connections, telling the stories of the veterans or of the senior who suddenly has a warm roof over their head, they're able to celebrate Christmas with their grandkids. It's those types of stories that touch our hearts, and it's something that we remember in our work at Kansas Housing, and those legislators are going to be hearing those types of successes.
That's great, Ryan. I think in our last 2 minutes, we have time for maybe one final question. But again, if you have more questions that we didn't get to today, please do reach out to us. We would like to follow up and make sure that we engage and get you the information you're seeking. This one is a little bit more of a technical question, and Deanne, it might fall a little bit more into your housing development wheelhouse. But how does KHRC anticipate allocating that $8.8 million in state tax credits over the next couple of years, coupled with the fact that, as Aaron told us, the 9% LIHTC credits will be increased starting in 2026. Do we know how that's going to play out yet?
Yeah, and I'll refer, or actually lean on Aaron for the technical help too, but it's a great question in light of the federal change with that 12% increase. And so that is something that we're looking at here, and inside the statutory language. with inside House Bill 2289 that passed to match and pair those K8, the state, I should say the Kansas Affordable Housing Tax Credit with the federal LIHTC credit.
Yeah, and Deanne, you explained it well. I mean, we're looking at what our options are. I mean, and some of it still is an unknown of exactly what our allocation will be. But looking at the language under the Affordable Housing Tax Credit Act, we're exploring all of our possible options of even potentially having a federal only project, things like that. So we'll just have to kind of see how everything plays out as we move forward.
Well, folks, as always, I think that we could continue these good conversations for probably hours, and I hope to continue these conversations, whether it's KHRC's visits in your communities around the state, whether it's the upcoming Kansas Housing Conference, which registration will be opening soon. Remember, it's in October this year, a little different than our normal time, but we look forward to seeing and continuing those conversations then. I do want to do a big shout out, not only to Emily and Deanne and Aaron, for their great presenting, but also to the magic that happens behind the scenes with the KHRC team, Kim, who's running the slides, Abby and Terry and several others that have been fielding your questions. A reminder that we will be sending out the video of this as well as the slides. Be watching for our funding announcements. Be watching for the news that we're sending out, whether it's in our quarterly newsletter or on our social media pages. We are out and about celebrating the good work that you all do around the state as we unlock home together. Thank you for your partnership. Thank you for your time today. I am so excited to see the success that we're all having together, and I can't wait to see what we're able to do together going forward. Have a good afternoon, everyone.